Unuchi, the project Respelling Obeah. And so the framework is that I have found in my research, I left Dr. Naya 20 odd years ago when we were both in cultural studies and went to Emory University to study Obeah and was led to an Igbo-centric rendering of the term as the best inroad into really unpacking it and understanding it. So I've been studying Igbo culture for a while, and I am an initiate of various West Central African, they call them mistress societies, which is better than to say secret because they're not secret. They're only secret to people who are not um, involved. And that word secret is obviously framed by the slaveocracy who didn't understand what we were doing. So I have this is about 25 years of research that I'm beginning to present. And really these are the A, B's, and C's. And I'm going to say some stupid things. They're going to sound stupid. I'm going to say some simple things that seem not to make sense within the context. But what I want to do is to remind you that the criminalization of Obeah occurred at the Taki Rebellion. And as long as you remember that, you frame that for those of us who identify as Black, our ancestors were fighting to be free from chains when this word became literized and simultaneously criminalized. So you have to go back and imagine a time when there was no Jesus Christ, there was no devil, there was no really black and white. And that is important for understanding Obeah because a lot of times we say, oh, why black people do this to themselves and how black people could say, when we're on the African continent, we don't think of ourselves as black. We're ethnic groups, we're different ethnicities. This notion that we did these things to ourselves and how could we when there's this other obvious enemy that is white, that needs to be debunked. And we need to understand that in every society, there are good and bad people, and that there were a few people who decided that this is what they wanted to do. Hence, our ancestors ended up over here. So that is a little framing. Think Igbo, go back to a time before Jesus, before the devil. No traditional society has a devil. This is all Western European conception. I want to welcome in particular the graduate students. I remember when I started out, it was Caliban's Reason by Paget Henry that led me here. Dr. Warner Lewis had said, and see if you want to write a review of the book. And in that book, Paget Henry said, we need radical research, radical methodologies. We can't use the current methodologies to get to what we want to know about ourselves because the signposts are all rotten. They're not there. There's a problem with them. So if we want to find ourselves, we have to do the radical thing. And when we talk about a word, etymology stops at the Greeks, because they fell out of the sky and they never went to Egypt and they know everything from get-go. And this is what we have to write to get an A in the Western Academy, that all of the etymology goes back to the Greek. They don't care, Greek and Latin, and African etymology is non-existent. And so what Project Respelling Obeah is going to do is going to take you back radically to some of these words that existed pre-Greek. We can't say out of Africa and then we stop and elide Africa. We participate in a Western education system that excludes us for the most part. And this is what has to change. So I'm going to share with you a piece written by Oja Master, who is a flute player. He wrote it for the rebels in Jamaica when he heard the story of the rebellion. For our ancestors, this is the sound of Obeah, not the negativity that we're used to. I'll just play a small part for you because I want you in respelling Obeah to also relearn how to hear and to listen. It's very important for us to listen because West Central African languages are tonal and we have to listen to understand them. And this is what he says when I first said to him, I do my research on Obeah.
Obeah, the healer. To revolt is to take your healing in your hands. To heal is to embrace divinity, to see God and become what you have seen. Obeah, Obeah, Obeah,
So we embrace divinity. We see God and become what we have seen. To rebel is to take your healing into your hands. To heal is to see God and become what you have seen. Welcome to Respelling Obeah. So I want to start with the notion of time. I was researching time. I was in an interview with a revivalist and she became possessed. And the energy said, if you want to understand Obeah, you have to pay attention to time. And so here it is that I learned why the Obeah man wears two watches. Obeah man wears two watches because he is the master of time. He embodies time. He understands time. He understands time as a binary. And so here we have the B cognate again, by, two. So the human being is both left and right. The human being is both left and right. Can you see, am I sharing my screen properly? Because the technology and I aren't, what are you seeing, may I ask?
We're seeing
Seeing a flyer, something looking like a flyer.
Yes,
see,
like a flyer, that's it.
okay.
Obeah, the healer.
I want to show you the representation of stop sharing. Of the Obeah man by in an Igbo-centric sense. So one of the things you're gonna have to do is bear with me with the technology. Thank you. So I'm back here. I need to get to Zoom. to share the screen. So the notion of the binary is the notion of the human being as two. I'll get to it. The human being as two. So B, binary, two. Obeah man wears two watches because the left side is considered female. We're split in half, and the right side is considered male. Right side, active, and the left side, more passive. How is this related to the calendar? There are two parts of the year. Ikenga. Um, the word in Igbo generally is taken to mean the masculine strength or the right side. But at the esoteric level, the word really stands for equality. Ike, strength. Equality as strength. That is to say, balance as strength. Okay, ancestors, this is crazy. My screen has disappeared. This is why I said we have to bear in mind that I am working with some other energies. Okay, are you seeing the book cover now?
Yes, we are.
Hello?
Yes.
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 Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
not
we
hearing
can. Are
us?
you here?
And you
Yes,
hear
right.
us?
We're hearing you, Claudette. We're hearing you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
I'm not getting any feedback.
Oh dear.
Oh,
Yes,
someone in
we're hearing you.
Yeah, we're hearing you, Claudette. I'm not sure what's happening your side. Maybe you have silenced your audio. Me don't know.
What is happening to the screen?
Claudette, there's on the screen a sign of God and Dibia.
You're hearing me? And
And
you're
we're
seeing
hearing
the
you
book
just
cover.
fine.
I don't know what I did. Thank you. Okay. So I hear that you're hearing me. So you're seeing the book cover. So you see the binary. This is the traditional rendering of a dibia. Dibia is the Igbo word for a healer who is resident. Obeah is the Igbo word for a healer that travels. So Bia, believe it or not, in simplicity, means to come. Obeah, the O conceived as a cosmic egg that contains nothing and everything. Therefore, it references he, she, or it. It's a plural pronoun. So when you say Obeah in Igbo, what you're saying is that this is a dibia, an expert. D is expert. Bia is wisdom, represents wisdom and knowledge in this sense. So a dibia is an expert in wisdom and knowledge. That is a definition of a healer. Ogwu, medicine, is considered supremely knowledge. Knowledge is medicine. Medicine is knowledge. This is what we've said in our own time. So there you see, after God is the Obeah man. After God is the expert in knowledge and wisdom. This is Igbo cosmology. This is what they believe. This is why we say only God knows, right? This notion that knowledge belongs to God, and God then becomes this kind of cognitive faculty. So Obeah, he, she, or it comes. Now, implicit in this word, Obeah, to come, is also the word to go. Because if you come, it means that you're coming from somewhere. The place from which you leave, the person will ask you, where are you going? in the 80s, if you were in high school, you would have heard tiger roaring, no wanga goat, no wanga belly. Ga means to go, and they go together, literally coming and going, left and right. Two watches. You're watching who is coming and you're watching who is going. You're watching who is coming, that's a female side. Watching who is going, that's active, that's the male side. So the coming and the going. The Obeah, that which comes, and the Wanga, that which goes. The reason why Ikenga, which is this composite figure that has equal left and right side, which is representative of balance, belongs to the equinox or equal night and day, because we're always coming back to time, spring and autumn. So for the Igbos, time is divided into two. That two is represented by the equinoxes at spring and autumn. When it's spring in one place, it's autumn in another. When it's autumn in one place, it's spring. You also have that binary. So when Tiger says, no wanga got, this notion that you will be negatively impacted by someone poisoning you, if you nyame nyame and liki liki and iti iti, it's the notion of wanga in Igbo, meaning to charge something, which is to say, sending poisons. We use the word to send sickness to somebody, to make someone ill by charging something with negative energy, whatever that thing is. So here it is. We have two watches. Initially, binary. Cosmically, you cannot have a child unless there are two energies present. So we come into the world as two, and that is foundational. And that is what Igbo cosmology says be and binary means. Through the years, this word has come to us in English. To be means to exist. That is to say, you're composed of two parts. Time, as the zodiac, is a fence, is considered to be a fence, that zero, that mystical zero in which we live. And that time fence for our time on earth is divided by the equinox. But time is also divided in four because the year consists of 4 seasons. And so this is why we say the Obeah man is a 4-eye man. And this is why guard rings usually have the cross on them. It's this notion that this time fence within which we exist are arcs. So we hear about the Ark of the Covenant. We hear about archangels. If you transpose the E and the L in angel, you get angle. So really what we're looking at are 4 angles that make up the circle, which is the zodiac. And for each of those 4, they're considered to be living energies and they're given names. They are guardians and allies. And so Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, everywhere we go within the realm of our existence, we see this 4. We have a 4-chambered heart. We have 4 limbs. We have 4 parts of the brain, etc. This again is fundamental and foundational and relates to the 4 seasons. So what is it that we know? To come, Bia, we know right now that we're in autumn. So autumn comes, but autumn is also going to go. It leaves. And so time is really about coming and going. That's all we're doing. We're circles within circles, coming and going. And this is the ring game, right? Punchinella, funny fellow. What can you do? The sun is now in Virgo. What can you do, Punchinella? We can do it too, because after it leaves Virgo, it's gonna go into Libra, and Libra gets to do what it can with the sun. So our ring games are also based off this notion of time as a circle and time as coming and going. The day comes and the day goes. So we have light and we have darkness, and that light and darkness is further divided into four. It gives us the fundamental aspects of living on earth, because we're obviously constrained by our cognition and our physicality. Four-chambered heart, Obi, means heart in Igbo. Obeah means this heart. The A becomes that which attaches to the Obi to make it this heart. This is what the word means back on the continent before 1760. And even in Jamaica before 1760. Obi also in Igbo means mine. Obi in Igbo also means house. So imagine all of these Africans coming in with this cognate, same meaning in the sense,
With the
but we
cabinet submission,
settle on
so the sign
something
says, I remember
we
the
can
AB.
trace
With the
one
cabinet
of the
submission, I see.
earliest
All these members are
ancestral
members of the AB board.
energies in the universe, because the Igbos claim that they are among the first to be human beings. I would also ask you again to look at the binary of Obi and Igbo. It's a mirror, it's a palindrome. And so therein, we also have the fundamentality of the word and of Igbos claiming this word as their own, as it obtained in Jamaica and the Caribbean and the rest of the Caribbean, or Caribbean, wider English-speaking Caribbean as Obeah. When we get to voodoo, that is particularly related to the zodiac as well. What we see are those arcs. So the V is the pizza pie, right? We're talking about the same thing, the zodiac. Voodoo, Odu means womb, it means matrix, it means pot. So when somebody says they're working voodoo, all they're doing again, at the most basic level, is astrology, because they're looking at the V to see where you fall in the V, that V being Pisces or Sagittarius or Cancer, as the zodiac is divided. But what has happened is that everybody else can practice their astrology and their whatever, but when we do it, it is seen as this very negative thing that is evil. So again, I remind you of the context that our ancestors were fighting for freedom, and the way to stop the bleeding and the fighting was to criminalize that which was given power. When we ask, what is it that makes the Obeah man powerful, right? Why can he make a guard ring? I just said, you look at him, he's the embodiment of time. So he always knows what time it is, right? But there are four forces in the universe: fire, water, air, and earth. So this is why, again, four cardinal directions and four eyes. And he or she alone has the power to access these energies. Again, it's a binary. What is above is below. So if it is that we come in at a certain time, and the Igbos say cosmologically that we're here on market day, again, zodiac, there are 4 market days, and these 4 market days are named after the 4 forces: Eke, fire; Orie, water; Afo, earth; and Nko, air. The Igbo calendar is called Ogwafo, that is to count the year. That which is considered earth is also the word that is given to year. it is also the word that is given to belly. So you can understand the notion of earth as womb again, coming back, Odu, and as belonging to female mother, Allah. So we have four-eye man, because he can see in four directions. And he can make a gathering because he knows the ancient sounds. He has access to that energy by virtue of embodying that binary. Okay? What am I saying? You talk about fortune telling. Well, again, it's four. All right, so you have four tunes, that is to say, four tones, four things. You also have seven of them. So fortune telling, again, is looking up at the zodiac, that's cut in four, and we're able to say to you, depending on what part of the zodiac you came through, we can tell what your life on earth is going to be. It's the same word, forecast, right? Is it going to rain? Water. Is the sun gonna be hot? Fire. Is it gonna be windy, or is it gonna be a hurricane? Both water and air. Forecast. This is a knowledge system that we had, that we still have to some extent, because there's still people who know. This is the basic knowledge system of humanity. These four: do, re, mi, fa. Ifa, afa, fa. Yoruba, Igbo, all of West Central Africa, this notion of 4 days being named after the day, understanding the power of the forces of the universe. And this is why, when people ask, why is it that African, quote unquote, powers are so almost, untamable, it's because, again, as foundational human beings and having access to that source, you know how to access the source, then you use it properly. These are people who were able to fly. They were the Superman. They didn't make cartoons about Superman. They were the Superman. They were the Aquaman and women. Kumbaya. The Obeah man or woman comes having been called. So at Igbo landing in Savannah, Georgia, where a ship of Igbos docked, and the Igbos decided that they didn't want to be enslaved, and they drowned themselves, some of them, and they ran away. This is being commemorated. The African Americans, called the Gullah Geechee there, have a song. Come, Bia, becomes the spiritual, African American spiritual kumbaya. Come, someone's crying, Bia, come. They're calling on the Obeah, the traveling dibia, the traveling doctor, the traveling healer, to come, because someone's dying and someone's crying and someone's hurting. And all across these Americas, we will find, if we look carefully, do our radical research, that this word occurs in places and spaces where people were really hurting and needed. There was no Jesus Christ. And they had to call on that which they knew. And in calling on that which they knew, they were deemed to be devil worshippers and evil. And up to today, we're told that we can't do our astrology, that we can't do our rituals. Because in 1760, those rituals tried to free us. So I always want to go back to 1760. It is 2021, 2024, sorry. And we're still saying that we can call on our own gods to help us. We're still saying that we have to call on somebody else's God to help us. The word Obeah has various meanings. The primary meaning, I'm here to tell you, when you spell it in Iboan terms, is coming and going, which is the sum total of our life here on earth. We're always going somewhere and we're always coming somewhere. We're always going somewhere and we're always coming from somewhere. Coming and going. When you ask, meet me somewhere, what do you say? Where? Space. Then you ask what time? Time. This is all that we're doing, and this is foundational, and this is what is understood. And if we stay at that primal foundational level, then we have access to these forces that we can use. Now, four-lobed brain, four-chambered heart, four limbs, four eyes, four forces. There are also four types of dibia. And what has happened is that the very tradition of healing has become associated with the more equivocal aspects of healing. Now, medical doctors get lawsuit. They get sued every day because they did something wrong. Goes to court and they either win or they lose. When the traditional practitioner makes quote unquote certain decisions, they're seen in negative terms, and then the entire profession gets defined by this negativity. So, four types of dibia. You have dibia fa, again, that is the divination system. So this is the healer. You could call him the fortune teller, but that's just for ease of understanding. The Dibia Alpha is equivalent to the PhD in modern society. So before colonialism and slavery, if you wanted to be an elite in your society, in Igbo society, you would be Dibia. Traditional Igbo society is divided between the Dibia and the Ofeke. That is the non-Dibia or the ignorant person. If you say Dibia, you're talking about a wise person, a knowledgeable person, and that is the equivalent of having a PhD. You see what people do, oh, he's a PhD, it's a big deal. But that knowledge system was more holistic. That's Dibia number one. He would belong to the eastern side of time, which is Eke. This is how we get all of these notions about the serpent and Eve and this negative representation of the serpent. The Igbos consider the python to be sacred. Again, obviously, it's foundational. The serpent is limbless, and therefore, it can form any letter of the alphabet you want. You write my name up there. You're going to touch my finger on the golden pen and write my name up. Well, it's a zero. It's a serpent catching its tail. Eke, the python, the serpent, that becomes, again, the binary, the stethoscope that the modern physician uses is based on the notion of the twin serpent, the binary, yin and yang, east and west, north and south, above, below. This is what medicine is. This is the genesis of the modern medical profession, that there are two things that exist. As the Igbo say, when something exists, something else exists beside it. So you're starting in the east, you're Eke, you're the serpent. It's creativity, birth. That's the Dibia Afa. His or her role is to know, and knowledge is endless. The second Dibia, which is the Dibia over on the west side of the zodiac, is Dibia Nise. Obviously, if the serpent is the creative force, Dibia Alpha, then Dibia Nisi is the destroyer. Again, you're hearing me saying things that exist in all other cultures. Problem is, when it exists in ours, it's negative, and we're the genesis of it. So you have the creative force, Dibia Alpha, the destructive force, Dibia Nisi, which is poison. Nisi means poison in Igbo. This is the Wanga man, right? I poison you. This is the poisoning of the fields. This is the poisoning of Massa, why they fled from the island because there was mass poisonings by the Obeah practitioners. That was one way of keeping, absentee landlord because they feared being poisoned when they came. This is what has been used to define the entire profession of the Obeah. We're going to come back to Dibia Nisi. Dibia Aja is the Dibia that does sacrifice. He is at the northern end of the zodiac, which is where water is. And so, again, this association of water and healing and water being life. We leave it at that. At the South Pole, we have Dibia Ogu. He's the herbalist. She's the herbalist. Medicine, literally, Ogu means medicine. And we're just going to say that, obviously, initially, what we used as medicine came out of the earth in those times. And these were the doctors, the healers, the medicine men and women, sum total of traditional society that kept it in balance, kept it in balance, kept it in balance. So the Igbo calendar is based off the zodiac, Zodiaca. We've learned about the Fa, or the forces, and the four. We've learned that the Obeah man wears 2 watches because he considers the reality of life and embodies that reality within himself as both male and female, light and darkness. Ikenga, then, that third principle, that in-between space, that liminality that gives us either light or darkness. I want to close by saying that in traditional Igbo society, one has to practice either on the right side or the left side. When I was doing research among the revivalists, they said that the big Obeah man, the most powerful Obeah men, are those who work with both hands. In traditional society, you choose one or the other. Obviously, because the nature of life is that if there's creation, there's destruction. There's a ritual, it is said, for people who choose to do Obeah Nisi, we're gonna call it that, or choose to do that quote unquote left hand, that they have no children, they have no family, because they don't want the repercussions to affect their progeny. And this is one reason why I think Jamaica has the highest murder rate, and why the society is so violent, because as the slaveocracy professed, we are such horrible people. These are my words. They said that the conditions of slavery were so bad that it forces the Africans to use the power of Obi against each other. Within that context, the first Moravian missionary that went to St. Elizabeth was first called Obeah because the Africans thought that he was coming to help them. And they demoted him when he had no powers to help them. I want to make a point about this, that Christian religion was denigrated by our ancestors because it did not have the power to save them. And so they kept singing, Kumbaya, Kumbaya. because Caries allowed the overseers to drag the women out of church and rape them. He couldn't feed them when they were hungry. Couldn't make rain when it was drought. So Christianity, as it first dropped in Jamaica among enslaved Africans, was thought to be a lesser religion than their own. And even as they were led to adopt again the journeyman Jesus, because this is an energy coming and going, higher consciousness. I'm going to end there on that revival note of the journeyman Jesus. If anyone has any questions to ask, I realize that the time is almost gone, and I apologize for my lack of finesse with the technology. Mia, Onika, could you help me unmute so I can hear the questions?
Dr. Anderson, can you?
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to.
All right. Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Claudette Anderson, for I don't even know how to, pinpoint the journey. You've taken us on a little Obeah ritual or a big one. From the historical to the linguistic to the philosophical to the,
Yes.
esoteric, spiritual. Much food for thought.
Thank you.
I particularly like perhaps what resonates is that you say, describe the Obeah man within the context of after God is the Obeah man, in terms of a utilitarian sort of context in the wider society. I want to turn over to our audience. We have quite a room full here. Much to digest, and I see we have people with all kinds of experiences here. So I'll immediately allow people to show their hands who might wish to, raise a question or make a comment. Let's just see a show of hand and then we take it from there.
Can Doc take down her screen?
Okay, so I'm seeing Dr. Perkins, Anna. Please go ahead.
Could Doc take down her screen?
Dr. Anderson, you're being asked.
Can you take the screen down?
Yeah, I'm give me a sec here. For some reason, my screen has okay. Is that
I think
I need to stop
sharing. Okay.
All right, is that good? I don't know what I did.
1 second, because I seem to
That's fine. Yeah.
I don't know if it's me. Okay, hold on. All right, that's better. Yeah. All right, cool. Just to say, thanks to Prof. Anderson, and I feel proud that I was able to be part of this conversation. Claudette and I go back from high school days, so it's nice to see the immaculate flag flying, right?
Yes. Through difficulties to excellence.
Amen, amen. And this is serious excellence, though, Claudette. And I have a strong suspicion that a lot of this elicits a lot of pushback in Christian spaces, particularly in Jamaica. And what I'd love you to talk to us a little bit about, because in a way, I do deeply appreciate how you point us to the fundamentals of human existence that shows up in all of the different spaces and in all of the religious spaces. And I think of some stuff that I've learned about what was happening during the time of Shakespeare and what John Dee and others did with numbers. And I'm hearing a very similar
John Dee, yes.
The different elements and so on and so on. So without hogging the time, two big questions for you. The binary is foundational. Could you speak to us about the Trinity? Is there any way or where or space that the threefold dimension shows up, and if so, how? And then really quickly, in the study of religion, what we see a lot of times is that one group conquers another, and then their religious perspectives get taken on by the ones that get conquered, because there's a perspective that one God is stronger than the other. And when I heard you talk about initial rejections of Christianity for lacking power, and then somehow or the other, the journeyman Jesus get taken on, I'd love to know if that's about Christianity displacing the fundamentals of Obeah. And if so, is it that the perspective of strength and one God conquering another at play in some of the ways that our ancestors understood and took us to here? But brilliant, so much to talk about. Happy to hear your response.
Thank you, Dr. Perkins. I'll answer the last question first because that's the one I remember. The notice that what appealed to our ancestors was this man who had all the features of the Dibia. The priest himself, this is what is interesting. The Christian priest just studies the Bible and he's an expert on the Bible. But the Bible, in particular the New Testament, is about a Dibia named Jesus. So our ancestors recognized Jesus as a Dibia, as someone with higher consciousness. And so, journeyman, you can call on him because he can come and go to, because those stories in the Bible, Jesus is doing the same thing that the Obeah man was doing. He walking on water, he causing rain, he feeding people, right? So Jesus is the Obeah man that they had to embrace in order to participate in colonial society and you know right. So yes, that is how I think. And remember that it's after George Liele came. George Liele, who was Christianized in Georgia and fought and then ended up in Jamaica in 1789, and because he was a spiritual Baptist, and they speak spirit language, which is the language that our ancestors spoke. Yeah. See it. So yeah. So George, so when the whites came, right? We have to use these terms that we have. They were getting nowhere with our African ancestors with this business of Christianity. But it was George Liele and the spirit baptism. This is something that our ancestors could recognize, right? And so as we say emanations of Obeah and out of Africa, we know that all religions emanate out of Africa. And we could even be more specific and say all of them are Obeah in that more holistic general sense, which is what I argued in my dissertation, that there's a Catholicity to African practice because it's so inclusive, because knowledge is endless. And so we don't need to reject anything. We can always incorporate because we recognize ourselves in it. So that is how I would answer that. Remind me of the first question.
So you took us to the binary fundamentals and you
the three.
And so
talk about. So Ikenga is actually the number in Igbo cosmology that represents the three. So there's no Trinity in the Christian sense. Ada is daughter. Adam is my daughter. So when we read the Bible through an Igbo-centric lens, we understand that Adam is not a man but a woman, because a man cannot have a child. And so the Igbos will talk about Umuada, all the children of Ada, all the children of Ada. So it's not Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, which is patriarchal, but it's the four again that makes up the house. The mother, the father, the son, and the daughter. That's four. The three occurs as that middle ground of power. If you weld two things together, I'm told that the part that's welded is the strongest part. And that is the part that represents the child or the children that makes for this notion of endlessness and eternity. So the power of three is not this patriarchal trinity with a spirit. It's the binary that is molded together as one to make that figure that understands itself as one figure representing two things or made up of two things. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I see we have MCGES, Culture Division, and then
It's
Dr.
18 hours.
I'm not sure who that is. Can you just identify yourself and go ahead, please?
Thank you very much. Hi, Claudette, how are you?
I'm very well. Pleased to see you, David. Thanks for
Yes,
coming.
yes, very informative. To be honest with you, some of the things I've learned here have really opened my mind.
Wonderful.
The
Wonderful.
thing that keeps coming back to me though is, ironically, you kind of mentioned it, Jesus as the Obeah man, and I'm just wondering how wider Jamaica is going to view, or what it is that we need to do to change the view here and probably in other parts of the colonial diaspora that has Obeah or sees Obeah, views Obeah as negative, as demonic, as nasty, as lower than Christianity, as something that we should do nothing with. And I wanted to find out how your work will assist in that very important and critical process. And again, thank you very much for your very informative presentation.
Thanks, David. Well, I mean, I think I'm doing it now. This is the beginning of those little stones that we're gonna turn. What I did a while ago was just to talk generally. These are the A, B's, and C's, really. And so, as I said, using the calendar, if people understand the calendar, right, as Obeah, all you're doing is coming and going. It becomes almost mundane. It's really stupid. In 2024, when you look back at it with the knowledge that we have now, right? To say you're criminalized, well, we understand from the slaveocracy's point of view, but for those of us who are descendants now, and we're looking at African ancestors, and we're looking at it, and we're like, this is like any other war, right? No notion of the devil, but there's this word, the adversary. So you know that something that's adversarial is evil to you. It's really bringing it down, I think, David, to this mundane level of, everyday Obeah, which is what I've termed a podcast. The night come, the night go. Obeah, literally, 4 words. The word means this heart, this mind, this house. Again, the zodiac as a house. I think that one of the things that I do when I do divination, and I use the Western system to help people understand, to help people understand Obeah. They're like, what? This is it? This is it? Part of the problem is the charlatanism, David. We have, again, the slaveocracy confessed that there were such wicked people that we had to be wicked to each other. Bob Marley said, when you have to get some food, your brother have to be your enemy. 300 years later, what do we do? Is it true that our brother still has to be our enemy? How do we reconceptualize what is good? Even this notion of goodness, right? Goodness is now defined as being Christian. In Igbo terms, goodness is to embody that Dibianess, that balance, right? The mythology around, and this is one of the things too, we can tell stories. The mythology around the market days is that, the rat was gnawing at Eke's basket, and Obeah said, what's happening with you over there, man? What's happening? He said, I don't know. That mythology in itself says that we take care of each other, we look out for each other. We have to know what's coming and what's going. Not that we need to bow down to some skinny man on a cross to save us. We never knew we needed to be saved until we were enslaved. We were enslaved so that we could be saved. We were okay doing what we were doing. And so another answer to that question is to what obtained in our communities before. If you had no savior in that Christian sense, because you had a house, you had food, you had family, your children weren't being raped by priests, right? If you had this ideal society, and we have signposts now that can take us back there, then we have something that we can use and incorporate. And this is why the calendar, which will be present at by the way, everyone who's here, you should know on the 28th, we're having a conference on Obeah, and we'll be presenting calendars there for people who want it. This is why I've called it integrating culture into your daily life. If we know this now, for example, that the month is made up of 28 days, that the year has 13 months and not 12. This is fundamental and cosmological. And you want to get back into the rhythm. I can only tell you about one of my clients' experience. Here is the calendar. Take it, use it. Pronounce these words as mantras. If it's an Eke day, you call on the energy of the day. It changed his life. He is now more balanced. It's a simple thing. Use the calendar. This is why we say that when we're coming with this cultural exchange, this knowledge reparation, we're presenting something, right? We're not just talking now. In Uchi Foundation, we're bringing Igbos into the island, people who know this thing. We have an Obeah man, or I'm using a Jamaican term, or Obeah, two of them who are going to give presentations. And we're saying, here it is. It's the most basic foundational thing. Start using the calendar and you'll find your way back, because these are living energies that will talk to you. So I'm not bashing any Christian. I am saying what exists, that priests rape children, and that the Christian church is the biggest pedophile institution in the world, and that when we were doing what we were doing back on the continent, our priests weren't raping anybody. Up to 50 odd years ago, Igbo children in the village, rural village, didn't put on clothes until they were 7, and nobody troubled them. That is what we need to find a way to re-embody in order to. Is that good enough, David? I think I may have answered your question lengthily, but I see 3 hands up. So
Thanks for it.
yeah.
Yeah, man. Dr. Gus, and then I see Isis, Samaj, and Kurt Henry in that order, then Melissa. Please go ahead, Dr. Gus.
Yeah, thank you so much, Claudette. Greeting and salutation. Thank you for that very riveting presentation. And I think you have made a very strong case for us to come next week, on the 28th.
Yes, man, on the come.
More. Yeah, but just one quick question, and it's a thought that you provoke in my mind. Well, one of the thoughts really, but it's actually serpent. And I raise that issue because I often see that Genesis story as a myth, you know. But can you elaborate more on how the Igbo people saw the serpent, and in a sense a relation to how it is described in that Genesis passage as the most cunning of all the animals and that kind of thing, you know, in that mythical story. But I'm just trying to relate that issue of because I've always thought sometimes without even investigating why use the image of a serpent, you know, as the most cunning. So I'm not sure if we can correlation, especially as it relates to the to the Igbo people and give some kind of analysis on that. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's a long question, you know, but let me try. So if you think of the circle, right?
I know, you know, we get no man, you know.
Yeah. Contains everything and nothing. Serpent catching its tail represents the circle. Look at the binary, right? If you're talking about cunning and wisdom and knowledge, the simplest way to answer that question is to say, think of the serpent making a 0 and then think of the serpent making a 1. That's the entire universe, nothing and something. Binary 0 and 1, which makes up our modern day computer. Our modern day computer is based off the fa, which is a set of 4 strings. Talk about string theory. The original string theory is alpha, ifa, fa. String that has both zeros and ones on it. And so without the creation of an international space station, they were accessing this energy from time immemorial, they will tell you. So knowledge, right, is binary. It's the 0 and it's the 1. And the serpent being limbless and also being that kundalini force, right, that sits at the seat of the genitals. And then the notion is higher consciousness. You raise it and you bring it to the top of your head, and then you get a halo, like Jesus, to say that you are Messiah. That is, you're anointed with knowledge. I hope that that answers it somewhat. The serpent itself, as Mose, M-O-S-E, which is Gemini. This is esoteric. Let me not get into that. But as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so shall the Son of Man be lifted up. If you understand the serpent, if you raise your kundalini, you lift yourself up to higher consciousness. That is the proper esoteric interpretation of that Bible verse.
Obeah.
Did I answer? Does that?
Yes, that helps. That helps, man. That helps. Yeah, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay.
All right, Dr. Samaj Hall.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for this presentation. It's been really interesting, as others have said. I have 2 questions. The first one is earlier in your presentation, you started off by saying that we have to relearn how to hear Obeah. And of course, you played the audio clip, but can you talk a little bit more about that, how sound matters in thinking through Obeah and where we've, I guess, come in this long process of being de-Obeah, if you will?
Okay. It's very interesting. When I was going through, particularly with the revivalists, every now and then, one of them would shout, "Listen," to the group, "Listen." And obviously, you begin to take note of how often the quote unquote spirit is telling people to listen. And so, what I discovered was basically, again, we're coming back to the fa, do, re, mi, fa, the 4. Igbo language, the Igbo language is a foundational language. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and in them hath he set the tabernacle, which is the zodiac. Each word has 4 basic, this is at the basic level now, has 4 basic meanings. So this is why I said Obi in tone can mean heart, it can mean mind, it can mean afo, it can mean belly, it can mean ear, it can mean something else. What we're talking about is orality. Our cultures were said to be pre-literate. They're not. They're post-literate. They're post-literate because they're so foundational and they're so advanced that they have coded, their cognitive faculties coded by 4-lobe brain. My dissertation could have been said in one proverb, right? But somehow with Western education, literacy is primal now. But before we wrote, we listened, we heard, and it is that foundational hearing that appeals to the cognition, to the cognitive, and make that notion. So the Igbo say, for example, mu, which is a human being, madu, right? This is a beautiful thing. The word for human being in Igbo means beautiful being, right? You're a thing of beauty. You and music came together, and you and music are going to go back home. This notion that sound is primal to what it means to exist on the earth, and that we need to listen to those sounds. So hence the 7 notes, the 7 chakras, right? Again, foundationally, the calendar being 7 weeks made up of 4 days. So right there, you see the primality of sound being coded into the very time, which is us, which is what we exist in. Does that help any?
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
Could you
All
also
right.
just tell us when, what this conference is that you're talking about?
On the 28th at the Institute of Jamaica Lecture Hall. I think it's called, our theater. On the 28th, it starts at 9 and it goes up to when you say. But
Okay.
there's going to be a concert with this young man, Gerald. He's bringing his Oja to teach us the sounds, the ancient sounds. And again, you're asking about sound. This sound is a language. Like, he will show you how the Igbos use it's a speech, it's called a speech surrogate instrument, and it talks to the masquerade, which we call Jankanu. And so we're gonna have that kind of rendering after the conference. 28th, all day at the IOJ.
Okay. And I see that Kurt has his hand up. Go ahead, Kurt.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Anderson, thank you for an enlightening presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Henry.
I am happy how you contextualized the notion of duality from the perspective of the Obeah man. But what I'm really interested in is how the notion of duality becomes skewed or misrepresented in the Western mind. And in Western religions and spirituality, you can't be 2 things at the same time. You have to choose one, right? And coming from the Bible, you cannot serve 2 masters at the same time. And you see that kind of challenge when it comes on to duality, especially how you go about expressing your spirituality and your spirit. In revivalism, for example, there are 2 branches, 60 and 61, some may say, 60 being the more Christian of the 2. And there's a contention within the revival movement that you cannot be 60 and 61 at the same time. You have to choose. So because of that, there is a crisis of identity, whether spiritual or ritual identity, within African-derived religious spaces because of this Western understanding of duality and so on. So let me hear your thoughts on that, Dr. Anderson.
Yeah, I would simply say that as I told you in the beginning, I was gonna say some stupid things. The agenda. Dr. Bewaji talks about epistemicide, the killing of knowledge, and how we've been made to be backward by this Western system. And so the agenda is to deny original knowledge and to deny truth, right? And what West does is to put you in a box and you can't come out. You're defined. Whereas in African religion, everything is holistic. So this notion again of black and of white, this is why I started in the beginning by saying, don't say, oh, how could black people sell each other? Because that's not how we think. That's not our tendency to cognition to say one thing is bad and the other is good always, forever. And so I think that because the Christian religion is the fulfillment or the carrying out of a particular agenda of epistemicide, that once we were forced with a gun in our mouth and being starved to embrace Christianity, we had no choice. This is how we were allowed to participate in the society. And after many generations, it just gets solidified, particularly because our own ideologies and our own ways of thinking were criminalized, right? And thought to be backward. I laugh now, when I look at all the emojis, right? People are like, oh, they were so backward, they can't, but nobody's writing anymore. Everybody's sending an emoji, but that's what we were doing. We're post-literate. So this epistemicide, this deliberate killing of knowledge is what afflicts us. Part of that epistemicide obviously is self-loathing. That if you're God, if you're been taught that you're made in the image and likeness of God, and you can't have a God that's black, then you're always looking at this little skinny white man on the cross, and you can't like yourself. So you think of yourself as bad. I mean, imagine that we think of ourselves bad now for fighting for freedom. It's the epistemicide, it's the lack of knowledge. It's coming back to David's question. How do we solve this? We just start with these little pebbles that we have now, and we just give people the information. That's all we can do, is make people aware. This is why I call what I'm doing knowledge reparation, because there's a gulf. There's a great gulf. And what's in between that is that barrier that says Africans are less than in all things, and that we get so overjoyed when somebody achieves something, and then I'm like, there was nothing ever stopping him from achieving it but the fact of colonialism and racism and slavery. That all of us, as Junior Gang said, life is sacred, but every baby born naked. But we have been taught that we're less and we have to hate ourselves. And so the 61, I like the 61 revival, because what it was saying is, what we going to revive African religion, right? Because what was there to revive? We didn't have Christianity for that long a period. And then so there were apparently some people, looking on and saying, man, what this Christian thing, we need to revive our Africanness. And this is 61. So there was some pushback against I would say, I'm trying to find the right word, the forced adaptation of Christianity by 61 revivalists. And maybe if we explain it that way to people, there will be less of a stigma and less of a tension. And to explain to them that if they're emanations of Obeah, that, as Africans, we're inclusive, we're holistic, because all things emanate from us. There's no speech nor language where our voice isn't heard. I don't know if that helps you, Dr. Henry. I hope I've answered the question.
We will continue when it's time for the conference.
All right, thank you.
I see Melissa's hand, and then Marjorie, and I'm going to ask that we pull up the plug at that point. We have 8 minutes to 6:30 at this point. So go ahead, Melissa.
Thank you, Dr. Nair, and thank you so much, Dr. Anderson, for the presentation. I'm happy that you started out by saying that you're going to say some stupid things, because I think perhaps my question would come off as that, but please pardon my ignorance. I wanted to be able to reconcile the information that you have, the truths that you have given us from the Igbo religion and from Igbo cosmology. However, I am thinking of the fact that there are many of us in the Caribbean, African descended peoples, and in Jamaica, we're from different groupings. And so in Akan cosmology, for example, do these same ideas and belief systems, are they similar? Are there any connections between them? Even if there are different words and so on, are the ideas similar? So that then if we are trying to understand ourselves and see ourselves within any of these spaces, whether we trace back to Akan or Ibo or whomever, will we be able to relate to the same kind of belief system and cosmology, the duality, binary, and the four and so on? So that's my question. I hope it doesn't sound too ignorant.
No, it doesn't, but I think that the very question answers itself. All of the Africans who came to accept this word as descriptive of what they do. All of them accepted it. Congo came, they accepted it. By the way, the Congo was said to be the wickedest Obeah practitioners during enslavement. The Akan accepted the word. Everybody who came said this was the word. Because there are similarities of the B cognate across West Central Africa. Gambia, Gambia, to go and to come. I go, I come. Nubia, the place where people are welcome. This B cognate goes even beyond West Central Africa, because we know it was the Igbos who left the Niger Delta, having minded to go up to the Nile Delta to mine it. So there is that conformity, that this was written by the slaveocracy, that there was a conformity between the different groups, and that they recognize themselves in each other, and hence. So one example I can give you about the four is that in Akan, children are named for the 4 days. They don't call them market days in Akan, but the week is the same calendar, and the children are named based on the day they're born. So that's one very stark prime example. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have Marjorie as the last question that we'll take.
Okay, good evening, Dr. Anderson. Thank you for your presentation. I mean, it was very informative, as everyone have said before. So I'm thinking, you said to rethink how we hear Obeah. On that context, a question that came to my mind is, how does speaking in tongue fit into the whole sphere of Obeah? Since it, in my humble opinion, it would appear as if it is mainly Africans or Black people who have this unique ability.
Oh no, I think George Lyle joined the Spirit Baptist back in the day because they were falling over and speaking in tongues. It's not uniquely African. But what I found, for example, in one of my sessions with the revivalist, when the energy came, well, before it told me to pay attention to time, it was talking, and I was like, okay, well, what language is that? Because after you've done this thing for a while, you become comfortable with it. And I was like, all right, so what language is that? And she said Congo. And I was like, okay, thank you. For me, what I think is this, that we're accessing something. We're accessing our ancestors. We're accessing ourselves, and we have forgotten the language. And so when they come, they speak in the language that they know. There's this notion that if there's nobody to interpret it, well, it's bad or whatever. I don't see it as that. I think the way in which we treat speaking in tongues is what is problematic. So, for example, I just said to the energy, what language are you talking? And, what are you saying? And then the energy can tell you, because the energy knows. Also, other researchers that I've read, have kind of said the same thing. For example, I think one researcher was observing a maroon ceremony. Was like energy came and it was so angry. Obviously the Maroons, they were always at war, right? So if you're calling on an ancestor, the ancestor is gonna come out and people are gonna pull the machetes and stuff. And it was like, why? Well, we were always at war. So if you're calling on this particular kind of ancestor, it's gonna come and it's gonna speak in that language and it's gonna be angry because that's what it was. So the tongues, this notion of speaking in tongues is not that they're speaking in an alien language. It's that we're accessing ancestral energies who come and speak in the language that they know. And if we're calling on these energies and they're coming, right, there must be a way for us to decipher it. And one of that is simply that, always going to be somebody there who should be able to ask this notion of, as I said, stand up on your key. So it's not just Africans, well, all humanity, all of us are Africans. But that if a message is coming and it's coming depending on where it's coming from, and if it's coming from way, way back and ancient, then that's going to be a language that we're no longer familiar with. But it's also a language that we should be able to access if the group is working itself properly. And I think that in most cases in the Christian church, in Jamaica and elsewhere now, with this syncretism of Christianity and African religion, that we don't treat it properly. And maybe that's where the issue is, not the speaking in tongues itself, but how we treat the speaking in tongues. I don't know if that helps.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Professor, it seems as though this conversation can't done right now.
Yeah.
The timing is clearly poignant, I suppose, as we move into the constitutional change issues and all of the things that are part of the reparations discourse. I'm really very grateful that you've, given us a high point as a start. The range of dimensions that this conversation includes and the kind of positionality that we as scholars need to take. We really need students who are also invested in this. I noted you asked at the top of the talk, who in the department. It seems as though it's a natural fit that we should have that kind of student interest. I'm sure the conversation is going to stimulate some interest in that direction. And I trust we can continue to have a further conversation with you. I think it's important to really go beyond where you started today and, to begin to unpack some of the important imperatives. But beautifully done, nice journey. I'm sure you've demystified this subject for many of those here and will set them in train for a real proper sort of update in the knowledge as to what our ancestors gave us and what we should be doing with what we were given. Again, thanks. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for the sustained work that you've been doing. I know this project is dear to you and you've been carrying it for a while. And we are the better for that journey you've taken, particularly how you've been able to share with us. I see Dr. Goss's hand. I'll turn over to him at this time. And thanks once more.
Yes, not to delay the gathering, but I think there are persons who are interested, Claudette, in being able to reach you or have some contact information. So can you just probably say where you can be found, right? So if persons really want to engage you further, and then you could just talk about just in a couple seconds or so, talk about the conference next week
Monday.
at the Institute of Jamaica, and it is you say for the entire day. It's basically free, right? It's a free.
Yes, man. Yes, man.
So
Free
it's like
and
everybody can come, right? And
everybody can come.
participate in that. But your contact information though, Claudia, can you just basically say where people can find you? And how
Yes, you can find me at unuchi.org, unuchi.org. Oh, okay. I thought I was typing it. unuchi.org. Or you can simply email me at respellingobia@gmail.
And you can also contact us at the institute as well.
Yes.
You can also reach out to her for you. And just to say one last quick word that next week now, two important conference events, the conference at Institute of Jamaica, and on the Thursday evening now we have our Walter Rodney lecture by Professor Trevor Monroe, talked about activism. So we encourage everyone to participate in both events for next week. Thank you very much, Jelani, and thank you so much, Claudette. This has happened, and it will continue to happen.
Yeah, man. My pleasure, and I'm happy that the interest is live. And next not next week, Monday, the 28th, not next Monday, the 28th, Monday the 28th, IOJ, Reclaiming Our Culture. The conference is called Respelling Obeah. Again, using an Igbo-centric lens. We have a delegation of Igbos who are coming down for cultural exchange to tour the island. They'll be going to Nani Day. They'll be going to Paul Bogle's vigil. They want to reconnect with those of us who are descended and also their own diaspora. So we have those energies coming in to help us understand Obeah. We're going to have a two-part. The first part in the morning will be, this is why we're calling it a square table, which is the definition of pure knowledge. Again, the four. In the morning, we have the traditional conference setup, and in the afternoon, we have a conversation around a table. We want the practitioners to come and people of interest to come and tell us what they think. We want to begin to draft a paper about decriminalizing and then integrating in within the medical. We've become alternative when we had to take care of ourselves for 100 and odd years with no biomedicine, and now suddenly we're alternative. So we want to talk about decriminalization. We want to hear people's experiences. We want those who are opposed to come and tell us why they oppose it. We really want to have a conversation, because then people will become educated. It's education and advocacy towards decriminalization and integration.
All right, so thank you so very much. So just to get my dates right, the 24th is our Walter Rodney lecture. That's next week Thursday, and the following Monday, the 28th, is that symposium. All right, get it right?
Yes.
Yes, right. Thank you. So thank you again. Thank you again. And Jelani, back over to you, Jelani.
Yeah, I'm thankful again. There's been questions about the availability of this research. Claudette, I'm not sure if you have any gag orders. I know that persons have expressed interest. Is this okay for us to share? I'm not sure where your headspace is at. Normally, we wouldn't share the seminars in our YouTube space like that, often because it's work in progress from students.
No, but I think we could share this one, Jelani. I think this is adequate to be shared and need to be shared to stimulate further conversation that we can have.
Okay. I assume that Dr. Anderson has no problem with that either.
Oh, definitely no problem with it. Share, share. And also, I had given Onika a PDF and a link to the article that is foundational about the Igbo-centric approach that I'm taking. And so it has a lot more information information in it in terms of the meaning of the words and what the Obeah does and this kind of thing. So people can contact ICS or I don't know how you would usually disseminate that, but I did share the article with her.
Okay. I'll arrange with the department that persons who are interested can be provided with both and figure out if there's a permanent way that we can pull attention to this talk. Yeah, man. I'm gonna jump off now. I'm sorry to run away, but have to go into another class. But thanks again, Dr. Anderson. Thank you, those of you who stayed. This has been a high interest point. I can see that still long into the session. And we hope to continue the conversation. You've challenged us with methodological issues as to how we teach and how we know and all of this important stuff in a most timely manner. Give thanks once more and bless you all again.